Not only is this veggie burger super good, it was also incredibly easy to make, and the secret was using gluten. Since in a recent poll you said you hate mushy burgers that take too much effort to make, I set out to find a firm but moist classic bean burger that holds together like an absolute champion. Since we also want this to have immaculate texture in every bite, we're gonna include a grain in the burger, so first things first, we've gotta make some quinoa, so let's go get it. So measure out a half cup in a strainer, then fill a bowl with water and give that the old digit shuffle to wash. Dump and then add your wa to the same bowl. Quinoa is a 1:2 ratio, so to this half cup washed quinoa we'll add 1 cup of water. Mathematics. Add a pinch of salt and stir with your finger to diffuse. Cover with a plate, slap it in the mic, and cook for 9 minutes. While it cooks, we're gonna build a castle of flavor for this burger. So grab a bowl, and not just any bowl, grab your biggest bowl. In my opinion, everybody should have 3 mixing bowls: big, bigger, and jagunda. To the bowl, add 1 tablespoon each of garlic powder and onion powder, 2 tablespoons Worcestershire sauce. And before you comment that this isn't vegan, yes, this store brand from one of the largest grocery chains in the US is, and there are several different brands on the market that are also vegan. If you can't find a vegan version, sub 2 tablespoons ketchup, which we'll get to in a bit. Now add a 1/4 cup of soy sauce. I didn't like how that looked, so I mixed it up. Squeeze out and add a 1/3 cup of ketchup. You may need to squeegee that one out there, or, use a finger to save dishes. Economical. Then 2 tablespoons mustard, any kind will do, and mix it on up. And right there is a whole bunch of flavor, my friends. For the protein base, we'll use kidney beans. Dark or not dark version, it doesn't matter. And yes, they're vegan, they only use plant kidneys, okay? Crack open 2 cans, strain and rinse them, and add them to the bowl. Set aside about 1/4 of them, it doesn't need to be exact. Def would be easier to do this before putting them in the bowl. Live, laugh, learn. And mash them with vim and vigor. I like to act like the bean bounty hunter looking for untouched beans to destroy. I'm using this handy little bean masher. If you want to do this step easily and, like me, hate being able to open your drawers easily, I'll link to this one in the description so you can check it out. You can also use a fork too, or just squish them with your hands. Once you have a total paste, add the rest of the beans you set aside and smush them until the beans you just added are all broken. No whole beans should survive. And when it looks like this, where it is 75% paste and 25% broken beans, you're good to GO. The thick chunks of unmushed beans will add a nice texture to each bite. At this point, your quinoa should be done cooking. Apply your anti-hand burning cloth and do a little puppet show. Critical step, and then carefully remove from the oven. Seriously be careful, this will be freaking hot and I don't want to be responsible for any damage to digits. If you immediately uncover, you'll notice some water is still in there and this will evaporate within a few minutes as it is still cooking. A few minutes later, you'll notice the water is gone and we have some good looking quinoa. And now it is time for our binder. And if you watch this channel, no surprise here, we'll be using Vital Wheat gluten. I tested out panko and flax egg and they all just fell apart. The gluten is gonna hold this sucker together incredibly well. Now this is the most important step to follow as it's the easiest place to mess up. So first, parchment up a pan and oil the sheet. Be generous here. Now evenly spread 3/4 cup or 95 grams Vital Wheat gluten on top of your future burgers and immediately work in the gluten. You really need to do this right away as we don't want the gluten to hydrate while it sits on top and get all stringy. We aren't eating here, more just getting the gluten dispersed as soon as possible throughout the dough. If you notice any gluten sticking to the bowl, go ahead and use your beanie ball to collect that off the side for easier cleaning later. Once you have something that looks like a big, old, hefty, without rushing, but not dilly-dallying either, rip off 90 to 150 gram pieces, roll them into a ball, and place them evenly on your oiled parchment. If you don't have a scale, fit them into a 1/3 cup to see how a roughly 100 gram patty looks. The first time you make this, try different patty sizes to see how thick you personally like them. I prefer them around 125 grams. I made 9 patties total, but depending on how big or small you make them, you may end up with 8 to 10. Once you have all your balls formed, gently push down out from the center to make a patty. I like to leave a little ridge around the circumference and concave in the middle and round out the edges. This 100 gram patty ended up being about 4x4 by 1/2 inch, and no need to use your measuring tape. You can just measure them to the size of your bun. Find any cracks and pinch them together. This will also make it less likely that they fall apart later. It was at this point I realized all 9 weren't going to fit on one of my trays, so I expanded my business to a second pan. Once all your patties are made, brush or spray the top of them generously with oil, and now we cook. Pop these in a preheated oven at 350F or 175C for 30 minutes. Now we still have a critical step left after this, but while these cook, let's talk about some variations you can try at home. Now you want this to be even easier, you say? Then just use beans. They won't have as good texture as my base recipe, but if that's your thing, then go for it. Want to use a different bean or grain? Go for that too. I tested out using ground walnuts and it was pretty great. Pulse a heaping third cup or 40 grams in the food processor about 10 to 15 times until you get small bits. Just don't turn them into a flour, and in the step where you added the quinoa, add this instead. You can also try subbing that for rice, lentils, or whatever grain you like. Other beans would likely work here too if you want to use black beans or pinto. I prefer kidney, but you do you. Please also feel free to bust out your spice rack and add in other herbs and spices you like. Try a teaspoon of cumin or thyme, for instance. Like it spicy? Add in a teaspoon or two of crushed red pepper. For more umami, MSG or mushroom powder would probably be great in this too. Okay, now back to the burgers. At the halfway point, if using 2 sheets, switch up their oven positions. After the full 30 minutes is up, let's take them out and see what we got. They are looking pretty nice. You can see they firmed up and they're holding together really well directly after the oven. They should be at least 180F or more in the center when they are done. Right now they're still hot and they are ready to eat now if you like, but let's let these cool so they firm up a little bit more. Remember that we used gluten, so if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that when we let gluten rest after the cook, it firms up. Optionally, but ideally, cool them down on a cooling rack, especially if you're gonna store them for use another day. Speaking of which, these freeze like a dream, so if you wanna use some now and store the rest for whenever, put them right in the freezer for an easy dinner later. Also, this recipe scales incredibly well if you wanna make enough for a few months worth at a time. All right, now for the final critical step. Generously oil and preheat a pan. Add your burger and move it around so it gets some of that fat on there. Once it starts to brown, flip, get a little bit more brown on the other side. With a super hot pan like this, it should only take about a few minutes. Into a toasted and vegan mayoed bun, add some pickles, your patty, some vegan cheese. I torched mine to make it look all pretty. Ketchup your toasted top bun, crown your king, and enjoy. It has a great texture with the quinoa and beans. It's really well seasoned. It is really hearty and tasty. Since this burger has no fat in it, adding the vegan mayo and cheese adds a nice fatty flavor that is lacking from the burger. And listen, this is not an Impossible or Beyond burger, so don't expect that. That wasn't the point. If you've been craving old classic veggie burgers, you should check this out. This is my go-to recipe now. You'd probably also like the video that just popped up on your screen. Until next time, you all, be nice to each other and keep cooking.